All right, Phillip, I'm so excited for you to come on today. You know that I'm a huge fan of you, a huge fan of Project Healthy Minds, and I really wanted to get your take on how we can reconnect to our sense of self while still amplifying the importance in a virtual detox.
I love it. Well, Hayley, it's good to see you. I love the work that you're doing. I'm excited for this conversation today.
Me too. Okay, so I'm just going to start off by saying that, you shared these amazing stats with me. And I mean by amazing because they're kind of eye-opening as well. That 96% of 18 to 34-year-olds are experiencing anxiety at this point. And 96%, that actually means 4% of people are feeling anxious right now. I mean, 4% of people aren't feeling anxious right now. Only 4%. I mean, that's eye-opening to say the least.
It's
I mean,
crazy.
it's crazy. But I really wanted to ask you, what do you think the common factor of anxiety for most is, and how can we combat that?
Yeah, Hayley, it's crazy. I'll tell you, Project Healthy Minds ran this survey. We wanted to get to the center of, for young people, how are they feeling right now? I think a lot of people would say that this was probably the most anxious year ever.
Yeah.
And although we've hit 2021, and we always like to think there's new beginnings, it kind of feels like in the middle of COVID, some things just don't change. And, when we ran this study, when the results came back and we saw that 96% of young people are reporting some level of anxiety, it blew us away. I mean, it's as common, if it sounds like right now, sort of, it's as common to be anxious as it is to drink water, right? And it seems to be driven by sort of a combination of things. It's this sort of mass social isolation.
Mm-hmm.
It's this fear of getting sick. It's people actually you're losing people right now, right? We have deaths every day that are unfathomable. And the economy for many places around the world are really tanking. And we've never had so many crises happening all at once. And I think when you bring all of those things together, whether you're talking about the economy or COVID or social isolation, the common thread across it all is that it's putting people on edge.
Yeah. No, it is. And I mean, 96%. I mean, if you needed to know that reaching out to a friend or a family member, knowing just 96% are feeling the exact same way that you are feeling right now helps you know that it's okay to not be okay. And we so ever often on this platform just talk about the importance in our self-care routines and how they can really be a signified effect in having a routine for every part of your life. Now, we spoke about this a little bit yesterday when me and you were catching up, and it was all about kind of figuring out how you find a routine in every part of your life, right? So it's a relationship routine, it's a work routine, it's a self-care routine. Why do you think it's so important to actually compartmentalize each one and understand how you're relating to yourself through each part?
Yeah, it's a great question, Hayley. And look, here's the thing that early on when COVID hit, we went to all of our medical advisors to ask sort of like, well, let's get beneath the surface. What's really going on? Why does everybody feel so anxious and so tired right now? And the reality is this, habits are the original human hack. It's how we automate parts of our day so that we don't have to make as many decisions, so we don't experience decision fatigue. But what's happened during this pandemic, we're unable to rely on all of our normal routines, and instead we're making hundreds of decisions every day that we previously just did by habit. And that additional cognitive load is exhausting and it's stressful. And so the core of this is like, okay, if you're going to try to get through, this really stressful time, you've got to come back to what are your routines. And in this case, with so many people in lockdown, it really means you've got to reinvent your routines, right? Everything that you're used to doing, that you grew up doing, that you do when you go to work, when you go to the office, right? If that's not the environment that you're operating in, that means you have to actually reinvent your routines within a new constraint. And that means getting creative. So that's sort of where we are right now.
So then how do we actually reinvent our routine? Because would that be reinventing the same routine that we sort of just naturally found through the first lockdown? Or is it kind of reinventing it as each day comes? What would your suggestion be?
Yeah, so it's a couple of things. Look, at the core, it's about creating psychological partitions to the course of your day. I think everybody right now, if you were to ask people, does it feel like it's sort of been a minute since COVID hit, or has it been 10 years? People would say like simultaneously, it's somehow both. I feel like, pre-COVID was yesterday and also like a time so long ago, I can't even recall it. And the reason why that's the case is we don't really have psychological partitions to our day anymore. It's just like one day bleeds into the next. And if all you're really doing is like moving from your bed to your living room or to your dining table, there aren't those same partitions. So you have to start from a place of, okay, whatever my constraints are, what can I do to create partitions over the course of the day? So for me, that means starting with the schedule, right?
Yeah.
And thinking about what are the transitional routines that I can implement to signify the beginning of my workday, right? So that might mean like waking up and working out and then using a shower and getting dressed, even if all I'm doing is moving from one room to the other, so that there's a routine in between, right?
Yeah.
And then it's having one place where you work that's not the same place where you also eat and also where you watch TV, because suddenly those spaces then just become the same.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I heard that has been amazing for me is, to the degree that you can rearrange your physical space, even if it's just a small space, it's taking chairs, if you can rearrange them to reinforce those new routines, right? So if it's taking a chair that's usually at like a dining room table or just at a high top and making it actually the chair where you work, and you put it on the other side of the room. So you have a space for where you work and a space for where you eat and a space for where you hang out.
Yeah.
It's those sorts of things that even if you can't really, even if you can't go get coffee, even if you can't go grab lunch, those still help you.
And also, I think, just getting to the point of rearranging your house, it allows you to sort of feel that control to your new environment. Because I think before you didn't really have that control because it was so set on what your routine was before, which was getting up and probably just leaving all that was at the house behind and then coming back to it later on. Now everything's merged together. So it's figuring out how to adapt to that change, but then knowing that the materialistic things or the physical things around you can adapt with you, right? So
it's like we've all become interior designers in the last 11 months. Like we got to figure out like things, I can tell you there's so many people who probably didn't think about what was really in their apartment or their house all that much because they were so on the go. I mean, I'm sure at least to some degree, knowing you and your schedule, that like you probably have never spent as much time thinking about your physical space as you do now because we don't have all the distractions that we used to.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing. My whole life has completely changed. I mean, I finally, for the first time, have said, I want stability. And I've moved back to LA to a place of actually building a home somewhere. Like I have a home in the countryside in the UK, but I've never felt like it was home because I was always in and out. And now I have this mindset of, oh, this is so exciting. I'm moving into a new place and I want to make it home and I want to make it stable and I want to feel grounded. And of course, the first thing that goes to my mind as well is I need an area in the home that I can work, and I have to make sure that that's a priority. And I think that's for a lot of people right now as well. But I want to tap into how everything that we do right now is virtual, right? So work, pleasure, to check out our minds, it's all in a virtual reality. And yes, we are all very comfortable, I would say now with it, but it's still an uncomfortable place to be when you really break it down. And it's probably really not great for our health or our mental health. But I wanted to ask you, do you feel, because I know my answer to this question, but do you feel this has completely contributed to the rise in anxiety stats worldwide?
100%. I mean, it's like all things in life, which is that doing one thing 100% of the time is almost never good for you, right? And the same is true of being glued to our phones and our laptops from the moment that we wake up to the moment that we go to bed. And, we've joked, I think a lot of people have probably joked for years about like, oh, we're all addicted to our phones. And yeah, that was true. But like that was in a normal world where we actually had things to do with our friends and with people we love and sort of this being addicted to the screen, it's
Mhm.
just not healthy. And so, I think this idea that we've replaced human connection with a screen, it's kind of like it's the reality of perhaps where we are now because we all have to get through COVID, but it's not a substitute, right? It doesn't solve, there's a limit on what you can accomplish using technology. And for a lot of people, frankly, this is a time when we're just relying on technology way too much. People need a detox. People
Yep.
need to take a break. I have so many friends right now who have said basically, okay, my Saturday or my Sunday is my day off. And
Mhm.
like, I am not going to text. I am not going to be on a Zoom. I'm not going to be doing all that stuff because I have no me time. Some people's like, oh, working from home. Yeah. Well, it's more like you're always working at home and
Yeah.
people need a break.
Yeah. I mean, completely. And I think one of the biggest things as well that you have shared with me are these stats. And I do want to say, because a lot of the audience who's watching right now, is a feminine audience, and there are reports that obviously women's mental health is worsening at rates nearly 30% higher than men over this past year. And I would question the fact that because of that screen time, when it comes to pleasure or social connection, we are unfortunately getting trapped in this world of comparison. And I want to be able to bring that to light to women who are looking at their phones to remember that their life is just as special and great in the way that you are right now, even if you're looking at somebody else who may be dealing with this pandemic in your eyes better than you are. And
Yeah.
that's okay too. But we have to remember that we can't compare ourselves even more so now because we're having more screen time.
Yeah, I think you're totally right. I mean, look, I think a lot of people are spending all day on their phone, and whenever they open up social, what they seem to see over and over is lots of really young people, especially young girls, who seem to be projecting this idea of like body perfection, which, in and of itself is a misguided idea. But that's not healthy if that's what you're looking at and that's what you feel like. And I'll tell you, I was talking to a friend the other day, gorgeous 27-year-old, and she was telling me how, every day she's opening up TikTok and she's looking at 18-year-old girls and she's comparing herself every single day. And the reality is she feels like, I'm not 18. I'm never going to be 18 again. But if that's all you're doing every day is comparing, and you don't have anything else to take your mind off of it, it's really unhealthy. And so, yeah, I think that like a big piece of what all of us need to be doing is trying to find a little bit more balance in our day and stop comparing ourselves over and over.
Yeah, and it's also, everything with arm's length, right? So, going into TikTok, but knowing before you go the emotions that may arise from opening up that social media account, right? So knowing your relationship before you start it. Sarah Haynes said that to me once when we did Redefine You on my platform. And it was such an important thing that for me to hear that she said, before I go onto my Instagram, before I read my comments, I prepare myself for what I'm about to see so that it doesn't become something that sticks on to me afterwards. And I think that's a really great way to look at what we do with social media today. If you're looking to check out and you want to go on TikTok, I mean, you have to also remember TikTok algorithm shows things in which we sometimes don't even have control over. So it's about doing it in that sort of arm's length of knowing that before you go on that you know your worth, and to not compare yourself, yet be inspired by other people's journey, and to just sit in that pocket of just trying to check out and disconnect to world for a moment. I know that we spoke about how researchers say that there's a lack of social connection can be more harmful than high blood pressure, obesity, or smoking. I know that we are all right now craving this human connection, but can we actually get to that human connection or social connection through a virtual existence?
Yeah. Look, I think that like all things in life, you need a healthy balance.
Yeah.
And humans are fundamentally, we're social animals. And the truth is there's a lot of people. So if you go to Reddit right now,
Yeah.
you will find hundreds of thousands of people on all kinds of Reddit threads who have lived experience with mental health. whether it's their own journey, whether it's losing somebody, whether it's trying to support somebody that they love. And if you actually talk to people who go to those Reddit threads and meet other people who are going through the same things that they're going through, you actually find that people find a lot of solace and peace in meeting those people. So there are times when digital communities can be very helpful for creating social connection. But the reality is that that is just one part of the use of digital, and that many times it doesn't substitute. And there's a reason why I think everybody, no matter where you are around the globe, I think everybody right now, the number one thing they want is to be able to be back with their friends and back with their loved ones in person. And so can social or can technology sort of replace the human connection that we want? Absolutely not. Are there some places and examples online where it can be helpful to meet other people? Yes, but it always comes back to meeting people, real people in real life.
So we are talking obviously a lot about the importance when it comes to giving yourself a virtual detox, but that's hard. And let's be real. It's very hard for us to put down our phones or not even watch TV or whatever it may be when we just need a distraction from what the world is presenting. So how can we actually give ourselves this virtual detox, but still remain feeling connected? So we don't feel like we are completely isolated or we've given ourselves a huge task that becomes another thing to be anxious or overwhelmed about.
Yeah, it's all about intentionality, right? So for me, like everyone I know gets into bed thinking that they're going to go to sleep at 11 p.m., midnight. What happens?
Yeah.
You start going down the social media hole. And then all of a sudden you look up and it's like 2 a.m. and you realize you just spent 3 hours on TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, watching a million different things. And that to me is really where it's not even intentional. It's just a hole you fall down, but it's not good for you. And it's not good for you before you go to bed. And so for me, it's thinking about, okay, I'm not going to disconnect myself from the world, as you were saying, right?
Yeah.
I still want to be connected to the world, but can I be more intentional about how I use technology, how I use social? And so for me, that means like, I like waking up and being able to check the news, but when I get into bed, my phone is down. And I do not, I make a real effort to try to separate, my sort of desire to check social and see what's going on before I go to sleep from sort of acknowledgement that, what, that's probably not the best thing for me. I'm going to take a step back and go to sleep. And for me, I think that's really what people need to do is be intentional about finding those places over the course of your day and over the course of your week where you can unplug. It's really hard for people to totally unplug. And I think it's kind of unrealistic to think that for most people that they can unplug, for a whole week or a whole month or a whole 3 months. I mean, for a lot of people that's hard. But if you can pick your battles and choose and create routines around, okay, at night I'm not going to. Weekends are when I turn off. That becomes the crutch for building healthier habits.
Yeah, and I think that it's starting small and then taking it from there, right? So it's also reminding yourself that if you're going to bed thinking about an event that just happened that emotionally affected you, you're sleeping with that, your body's processing that. So I think it's about being able to say, even if I can't put my phone down during the day or because my work presents itself that everything has to be through a virtual experience, I want to be able to say to myself, I want to go to bed feeling motivated and secure about the morning ahead. And in order to do that, I need to have control over what I see and what I feel. And I can't do that if I go into a social media platform necessarily.
Totally.
I think, yes, go on.
Well, I think, one of the things, Hayley, that I think a lot of people in this moment are struggling with is they feel like they've lost all sense of control over their lives. Right? That COVID has disrupted that feeling that we have of being able to control and shape our destiny in some way.
Yeah.
And that loss of control is scary and it creates anxiety and it's tiring. And so I think you're exactly right, which is like, if you can find ways to reassert your control over
Mhm.
your own life in small places, it can be really helpful.
Exactly. And I know that within work, there's a lot of things that we can't control. I mean, everything is put through a Zoom meeting, a Google Meet. I don't think I've ever there'd be certain people that I probably would have never had a meeting with in person that now I'm having a meeting with and their camera turns on and like, oh, okay, we're doing it. We're doing it. Hi. Like I'm here. So I think that it is becoming that pressure now to feel so inclined to know everything about our workplace in a virtual aspect. How do we deal with that? I mean, how do we disconnect from feeling like everything we do for work now has to be through a virtual experience and we have to be so inclined to know everything about it?
Totally. Well, it's kind of like there's new rules of the road when it comes to feeling included in the workplace in 2021, right? That like we already had this law, we were already, society was already in this sort of vibrant debate before
Mhm.
COVID around how we bring our whole selves to work. And now it's kind of like you have no choice. You're bringing your whole self to work because you're zooming in
Yeah.
or Googling hang up from your kitchen or your bedroom and it's funny, a lot of people struggle with being able to disconnect. We talk to all kinds of employers all the time and folks who run HR. And one of the things that we're hearing across the board is employees feel like they can't actually disconnect from work.
Mm.
That because work has come into their home, they always feel like they're on the clock. And it really comes back to a couple of things. One, you have to set boundaries. And it's really hard for, look, a lot of managers are not trained on mental health. That's one of the big problems that we have with business in workplaces around the world right now. You go through all kinds of training as a manager, all these sorts of things that you learn. For a lot of businesses, they're behind on actually training managers on the issue of mental health. That's one of the big things I hope coming out of COVID is one of the big lessons that people take away, which is that, okay, mental health is as important as every other issue in the workplace. But one of the things, if you actually go through mental health first aid training at work, which is a fantastic program, one of the things you learn is that you have to create boundaries, especially in COVID. You have to establish new boundaries because everybody's working from home. And if you never have that conversation with your manager, or if that manager never starts that conversation with an employee around, okay, you know, if you're, say, a woman who's both running a team and has two kids who are on Zoom getting educated virtually every day, it may require a new set of boundaries, right? The same 9 to 5 that we're used to may not work for somebody who's balancing something like that. And that's okay so long as we set new boundaries. And so to me, it all starts with, have we even had our first conversation around how we create boundaries when I'm working and when I'm off? And it's not going to be so linear. It's not going to be 9 to 5, 8 to 6. It's not going to be the same that it was pre-COVID. It's going to require us to be a little bit more flexible so that we can be a little bit more inclusive.
Yeah. And also tap into having better communication with our work colleagues and our bosses. I
Totally.
think it's about not being afraid to be vulnerable in your workplace anymore, because the more communication that you can have will only benefit yourself at being able to succeed in those boundaries. Because I think sometimes you can try and set those boundaries, but then still kind of crash back into the habit of not feeling enough in the workplace if you don't actually communicate what's really going on behind the scenes. So I want to say to you, because I know that this is something that even pops up into my mind, but if somebody needed to really take a mental health day, say they woke up and everything was too overwhelming and the kids were in the house and they're trying to figure out how to sort of compartmentalize getting back onto a Zoom, or taking this really big, pitch meeting, and they necessarily are getting so overwhelmed that it's becoming an issue. I think we are allowed as people today, and we should be, vulnerable enough to say that I can't do this today. It needs to be rescheduled without shame and without guilt. But is there something that you would say that would be verbiage or vocabulary that you would encourage somebody to use in their workplace to have them truthfully understand, but still knowing that it's a very respectful way of approaching the situation?
Yeah. I think it begins with sort of a small act of courage, which is really about honesty.
Yeah.
I think that it's when we are unwilling, when we shield what's actually happening in our lives from our coworkers, from our managers, it's a lot harder for your manager or your coworker to understand why you can't do that meeting or why you can't really work today.
Yeah.
And it's that miscommunication that then breeds this like distrust and this conflict. But I don't know anyone who, if you're really honest with somebody about what you're dealing with, and you're basically saying, listen, I am willing to make it up. I'm willing to do all of that work, but here's what my constraint is. I have a sick parent. I have a sick child. I have a kid who I have to get on to Zoom class in the morning, and that's why my 9 a.m. call that we had set up pre-pandemic is really hard for me. The authenticity and the honesty, it's really hard as a coworker or a manager to not hear that and respond to that. I mean, you really have to be a jerk to hear that and just say, I don't care. So if I had to say one thing, it would be to lead with a little bit of courage and honesty, because it often pays off in ways that might surprise you.
And how cool is that, though, that this year lended itself to reminding people that honesty and courage are two of the most beautiful aspects that you can have within your life in all parts of your life. Like, I don't know. Sorry. I just think in my mind, in my opinion of this past year, there are positives that we can look out of it, and then we can go, you know what, I've taught myself so much more on how I can make sure that I'm checking in on my personal self-growth in all different parts of my life, and not feel shame or guilt about it.
I couldn't agree more. And I'll tell you, one of my favorite artists is a young musician named Chelsea Cutler.
Mm-hmm.
And she released an album that's called How to Be Human. And I feel like COVID and 2020 was really a lesson plan in reminding us how to be human in an age of technology and social media, how to be human in an era of sort of political division and a divide between people across socioeconomic class, political class, and just a reminder of how to be human within your own family. There's so many people who are reconnecting with their families right now because they've been forced to confront, when you're not running around every day from dinner party to dinner party, from meeting to meeting, and you're actually forced to confront who matters in your life.
Yeah.
It brings you back to your roots. And so I think, to me, if we come out of COVID with sort of reminding ourselves how to be human, what a lesson that is.
Yeah, of course. And I'm gonna leave it all with this one thing, because being human, we all deal with mental health. And I think there's still people out there who are skeptical enough to feel like mental health relates to them. And to those people, I would love to know what your answer to that is, because it's been such a blessing for me to finally really speak openly about my mental health. And I don't think I used the word mental health very often before pandemic happened. But then I think, when we started to actually really understand all the different characters within our mental health, and that we all deal with mental health, but just at different levels and different doses, then you realize that we are all connected into a place where we have an understanding towards the next person. So to anybody who may be skeptical that mental health relates to them or this conversation relates to them, what would you say?
Get over yourself. Seriously though, this idea that mental health is only for some people, or only relate, is so crazy and outdated. Nobody would ever say that only some people have to deal with their own physical health. Everybody deals with their physical health, right? And some people have certain advantages or disadvantages due to genetics when they're born, right? Like I'll tell you, my younger brother can eat 5 hamburgers and not gain a pound. And I really wish that I had that same luxury. I don't. But that doesn't mean that he or I are any less, that physical health is any less important to him as compared to me. And the same thing on mental health. You know, everybody uses, it's interesting. In this work, one of the things you find, you talk to all kinds of people, Hayley, and, you know, some people are further along in their own journey of sort of being reflective about themselves. And some people will say to you, oh, I don't have any mental health issues. And then 10 minutes later, they'll talk to you about a time when they were depressed and really down, and they had a breakup that, you know, they couldn't leave their house for 2 months. And it's like, how could do you not, you know, how do you not see this? This is like crazy. And so, you know, what I would say is, you know, it is not a sign of weakness to recognize that we're all human, right? It's actually a sign of strength and courage to say, you know what, everybody has a mental health story. Mm-hmm. And that story is not one story that lasts your whole lifetime. It's not like, you know, it is one line in a book that defines you. It's not really something that will be on your gravestone. There are chapters in a book, and you get to help write the book. And not everyone is born the same way. Not everybody, you know, there are lots of people who have all kinds of things that are outside of their control, but you still have the opportunity to write your own chapter, mm-hmm. and to write many chapters. And some chapters are going to be down and some chapters are going to be up. And that's kind of the beauty, I think, of what it means to be human. And so for anyone who says, oh, well, mental health, you know, doesn't matter to me, or, you know, that's for other people, you know, I would encourage them to get over themselves, but to think a little bit more, ask deeper questions, and talk to people that you love. I mean, just statistically, you know, there's a person that we work with who has this great line, which is, you know, that if you're not one of 4 kinds of people, then mental health probably doesn't relate to you. If you're not a mother, father, son, or daughter. But if you're one of those 4 things, then statistically around the world, you or somebody you love is likely to be dealing with something related to mental health right now. And so it's just about pushing deeper and being more reflective, and thinking about what we categorize as part of our mental health story and not.
You're amazing. Project Healthy Minds is amazing. You know, one of the best gifts for me was getting involved in mental health and speaking up about it, like I said, this year. If anybody wants to get involved more in the movement, or to learn more about resources, or how to talk to your friends or your family members, or how even just to check in with yourself, go to projecthealthyminds.com/community. I just thank you. Thank you, Phillip. And for everybody who's watching right now, you guys, it takes a lot of courage even to stay and watch something like this, and to be able to understand that there is so much strength in the vulnerability, and understanding that we're all dealing with our own mental health stories, and that we, just like you said, have the power to write the way that we want it to go. So thank you.
Thank you, Hayley. It's good to see you.
So good to see you.